Now, to discuss this next session, I would like to welcome on stage the Esteban Contreras from Sprinklr and Guilhem Fouetillou, please, from LinkedIn. Sorry, Linkfluence. Oh, yes. Thank you. All right, the emotion. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have the way to ask you what you do. You know, we did it before. I want to do it again. What each of you guys do. Can you tell me what these guys do, please? You. Tell me what Linkfluence is.
This is interesting.
Yeah, what do they do?
Linkfluence is focused on monitoring and the European market, particularly around influencer identification.
Okay. Could be worse.
How do you rank
for a competitor?
From 0 to 10.
No, a good 5, but we'll work on that. We'll work on that after the
we'll try to improve it for everybody.
Champagne.
We'll try again
I
next
think
time.
At the end of the evening, it will be perfect, and
Okay,
we should
good.
hire him.
What do they do? What is Sprinklr about?
No, I'll try to do worst. No, Sprinklr, it's a social relationship platform, so giving all the infrastructure just to engage with clients on the digital aspect. And it's a pretty rising company coming from the US. We start to see in Europe. So it's good to have good competitors. It means that the market is becoming mature.
How fast do you rise? You're rising, and how fast does it go? Just for the audience to know.
How fast did
Your
we...
growth.
Yeah, well, we started in 2009, started in New York City. When I first met Sprinklr, I was working at Samsung, and we were one of the first clients they had. There was a handful of people in a basement in New Jersey. And there was a team also that started to get created internationally. By the time I joined 2.5 years ago, we were about 50 people. And then we've had over 10x growth in the last 2 years. So it's been really good growth, and we're excited. We see a long-term view of social media management. We are not focused on the short term. We're looking at where brands and consumers will communicate 20 years from now.
Okay. And how do you position yourself in terms of growth? Linkfluence, it's...
high growth since 2 years especially. We created the company in 2006, but the 5 first years of the company were more focused on market research, and we launched our software solution, Radarly, in 2012, just to do social media intelligence. And we experienced a very high growth in the last 2 years. We opened our office in Germany. We just opened London last week. 80 people, and we'll hire around 40 people next year.
Wow.
So yes, it's a and we are the first player in France today. Biggest player in France.
What type of clients do you have?
Clients are Fortune 500 mainly, major brands. We had a workshop this morning with one of our biggest clients, with Danone, and you saw Michael Edan on stage just before, I think. And it's really an honor for us to work for this brand, because they chose us to deploy all the social media listening approach worldwide with them. And so yes, Danone, McDonald's, Sanofi, this kind of big players.
Okay, but both of you are indies. I mean, indie player in that field, that correct, no?
Yeah. I mean, we would consider ourselves an independent player.
Respect to what? Can you explain a bit more?
Yeah,
Who are these competitors?
You know, internally we say we're a startup. We're over 550 people, but we were started in 2009, and we've kept a startup community feel. So we see ourselves as an independent company. We see you know, an IPO in the future. We're very focused on building a company that is going to partner with the world's largest brands. So in that sense, we want to remain independent.
Mm-hmm. You think it helps to be faster and more innovative than competitors?
I think we've always focused on our clients. So we have
vision.
Very focused on being as close as possible to the world's smartest and most creative brands to understand their needs. So instead of looking at the trends, you know, and social media trends have come from things like Twitter dashboards to Facebook apps, we are paying attention to what the brands are needing so that we go alongside them. So we're not really focused on how quickly we go or where our competitors are going or even where the space is going. We're very focused on what our clients need and what they need yesterday, what they needed yesterday, what they're going to need tomorrow, 5 years from now.
So that's exactly the topic of that panel, is listen, attract, and engage. So we see this as part of all the digitization process of brands. And I'd like to know how both of you help them do that transformation. Each one of you, maybe you want to answer that.
Yes, it was something we talked about this morning with Danone, because what is really interesting with this kind of brands is they start to understand that, of course, digital is everywhere, but they need to transform internally to be able to leverage all these social conversations. And at Danone, for example, they created a framework on 5 steps. The first one is listen. The second one is engage with your consumers. The third one is sell. The fourth one is reach. And the fifth one is next. So it's next, it's the connected object. And what I think is important is that they understood that the listening is the first part of the story. You have to connect in real time to your consumers on social media, because it's the only place where you can just see how they consume, how they behave, what is their consumer journey, without any influence on what they are doing. And this digitalization comes from first this listening of your consumers. And I think, yes, it's really an important first step.
And what's your take on this? Because you have maybe, I would say, a global perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we think about it is that the internet has transformed the front office. So in the last 20 years, customer care, HR, IR, PR, marketing, all these groups have radically been transformed. And for those people that have lived through those 20 years, they can see the difference. But you know, if you're going month to month, you see it as a gradual change. But really, the whole front office has been transformed. Yeah. The back office was transformed earlier. So, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s, we saw the rise of really big companies that were thinking about finance, that were thinking about resource planning. We're thinking about a lot of the back office stuff. We're thinking about what the front office has to do to be able to respond to this dramatic change of the web transforming how consumers think about how they have conversations with companies, but not just conversations, any form of interaction when you go into a store, when you go into a website, when you get an email, when you open a mobile site. And so we really think about this idea of experience management. Yeah. And that's what we're really, really focused on and passionate about. Because if you can't manage those experiences, or let's say guide those experiences, then you will likely fail your customer and consumers that may not even be your customers.
This experience management is really important. But also what we realized and what brands realize is that social web is not only about real time. It's also an archive of everything that happened in the past. And we have more and more clients now who want really to leverage all these conversations and have a reflexive point of view on everything that has been said, for example, on an issue, on a brand, on 1 year, on 2 years, really to have a strategic understanding of what's happening. And this approach, this ability to grab this historical data, this archive, is really changing the way of doing, for example, market research and to understand the consumers. And I like to say that we are moving to a period of continuous insights, because you don't need to build complex methodologies with qualitative research, quantitative research every quarter or every semester, every 6 months. You just need now to listen continuously to what people are saying and understand how it changes your business, how it changes your products.
And yeah, please, if you have experiences to share with us, I mean, let us know maybe some concrete examples of how you take this into practice.
Yeah, I mean, if I can add up to that, I completely agree that it's interesting. Research used to be something that every quarter you would get a listening report or a monitoring report, and it would have a word cloud, and somebody would say, here's the report, and that would be it. Yeah. We're moving to a world where it's happening every second. But you're right, it's not just about real-time marketing, which kind of became a trend in the past couple of years. It really is about context and understanding the consumer, right? So when people think about context, they're usually thinking about Internet of Things or sensors. But in reality, context is the data that powers any interaction in a physical or space when it interacts with the digital space.
Can you give us an example?
So I'll give you an example. For example, when a brand, and I won't talk about any specific brand, but a video game console, right? Yeah. They announce a product. And so they announce the product, and within weeks, this product is going to ship. Immediately, as soon as this product is announced, they can listen to their consumers, and they can interact with them, and they can gauge what are the things that people really, really liked and didn't like. In the past, they didn't do this. You would announce a product, the product would be finished, and you would ship it. Yeah. Now, within a few weeks, that video game console was able to say, all right, we have a big flaw here. Let's correct that flaw, add it to the software, and by the time that the product launched, what everybody wanted was included in the product. And so that's kind of what you're saying, that it's not just about the real time, but it's understanding that this is more about having the right infrastructure to make changes to your product, making changes to your marketing, making changes to your PR, whatever it may be that you're focused on. And ideally, all these groups start to integrate so that they collaborate and they can not have a report that said, people didn't like this 6 months ago.
Too bad.
You can say, let's act on this right away.
And execute.
Maybe sharing another example with you. Still Danone, because it's the example we gave this morning for the workshop, but I think it's really interesting to see how listening can be not only brand-centric, but can be topic-centric. Danone wanted to communicate about probiotics. And they really feared the fact that people, if they talk about probiotics, they would be attacked by consumers online because people fear probiotics. And we worked on research on different countries, including France and UK and the US, just to give you three of them. And we realized that in France, people talk a lot about probiotics, but they also talk a lot about the side effects. So they fear probiotics. But in the US, they only talk about the benefits. And Danone didn't know that, and they really realized that they needed to have a content strategy that would be adapted to this different culture compared to probiotics. And if you are only in a social listening about your brand, you won't be able to listen to people talking about general issues or about their consumer journey. Or when you are Danone, it's much more important, I think, to listen to people talking about the breakfast than to listen to people talking about specific Danone brands. And you need to do all of that if you want really to have a comprehensive view of your social media landscape.
So I bring one question from the audience, so make sure to ask the questions in the Interact section of the mobile app. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So maybe you want to take it to talk more about the opportunities. The question is, what is the biggest challenge in listening in a global environment? The biggest challenge. The biggest
challenge to listening in a global environment. We really think that silos are the biggest challenge. So usually the way that traditionally listening has been done is that you have someone in consumer research doing listening here with one tool, and then another team in the same market in marketing maybe having with a different tool and a different approach, different metrics, and then you have a PR team doing the same thing. And then if you did an audit, and we do audits all the time, if you looked at an audit, you find that you have 100 people doing the same thing, and they're not connected at all. So it's a challenge that can be fixed when you have an infrastructure and an approach. So I would say, you need the right strategy, the right infrastructure, and that includes the right technology and the right people that know how to collaborate. And sometimes it's a cultural thing, sometimes it's a technological thing, sometimes it's just a lack of strategy. But if you can remove those silos, you start to understand what you need to understand, and ideally you start to act on it, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't act on it, then it doesn't matter.
What about you?
I think, of course, what Esteban said is really important, and we experience that also, so I won't add anything. But there is another challenge, and it's maybe a much more technical one, but that is really, really, really critical for our market today. It's the linguistic capabilities. Because when now we work with global brands on multiple markets, different languages, and you have to provide the same level of analysis, the same kind of KPI for each of these countries. And maybe you don't know that, but the technologies we are working on, the engineers are developing in our market, are mainly text-based technologies, because what we are analyzing, it's what people say. It will change in 2015. Maybe we'll talk about that later on the future of the market. But the visual web is coming very fast, and we start to work on how to analyze images. But right now, the majority of what we are analyzing is text. And when you have to deal with Chinese, French, English, and Arabian, you need to have technologies that can deal with all these languages. And that's why, and it's a funny thing, on this market, there is very important number of big players that are not US, American, but that are European. And why? Because in Europe, if you want to exist on this market, you have to develop technologies that are not just focused on your language, and you have to develop at the beginning technologies that will deal with a lot of languages. We work with 60 languages at Linkfluence, and people that work at Linkfluence, social media researchers, only in Paris manage 18 different languages to be able to really work on the technological side and on the market research and the research analyst side with all the countries our clients are implemented.
Sprinklr, how many languages?
No, we're global, so we have to look at every language. We have about 20 social networks. We look at millions of sources. So we have to be global, and we're constantly adding channels, constantly adding new sources that come in. And I agree, there is the language challenge. There is also the sentiment challenge is another challenge, I would say, because, for example, if you look at politics, you have sometimes two parties going against each other, and then the sentiment will say, well, 70% positive. But you have to look at the fact that sometimes there's just two parties and they're fighting against each other. So there's also that issue of one metric giving you the wrong information. I think that is another big challenge in there.
I have an interesting question coming from the audience again. I don't know what it is, actually. I mean, I know part of it. What about this dark social web? How do you listen to it?
Yeah, there's been a few reports about the dark social web, and they end
What's
up...
that? Well, first of all, what is it?
Dark social web is anything that you don't really know where it's coming from. So there's two camps. One says that it's the secrets and the whispers and all these anonymous apps. And then there's others that say that the dark web is just something you can't track. What's interesting is that people are finding that a lot of what they thought was dark web is actually coming from Facebook, and maybe it's coming from the Facebook mobile app or the Facebook mobile on the browser. So I think that there will always be a challenge of certain places that are private and that you can't monitor, right? And that's just something that you have to deal with. But the fact is that the web is the best focus group out there. There's unsolicited, unstructured feedback about a brand, and there's more than enough, dark web or no dark web, for you to listen to and to analyze and to think about. And I think that brands have a responsibility to do something, to have empathy to the people that are saying things about them. And if for some reason somebody doesn't want them to hear something, because it's on a dark website or something, then that should stay there private, and brands should just respect that.
Yeah. And we were talking before about, maybe you have a take on the dark social web. You want to react on that?
I mean, you start to focus on the white social web.
Yeah, you start on that.
And I can assure you that today, maybe there's only 10% or 15% of the real value in this data that is managed and that is really exploited by brands. So we just have to move further and focus on that. And because at the end there's also a lot of question about privacy.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important point of our market. Because on one side you have private networks that start to sell the data that you put inside, and you're supposed to, you think that you are on a private network, and we focus, Sprinklr or us, we only focus on the public data. And it's data people want to put in at the visibility of everyone, you know. So I think it's also a contract between the customers, the brands, and us, just to be an intermediary and find the right data for the brands, and this data has to be public.
Yeah, if I could just give a quote, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg that said, it's not about what we want to know about people, it's, or what they are saying, it's really about what people want to be heard and what they want to be known about them, right? So I think there is a line that you shouldn't cross, and it should never be crossed. And there's privacy concerns, there's security concerns. I think that brands need to make sure that they have a point of view on that. Yeah,
this connects again with what we were talking about, what's next for marketers, what is happening like in 2015. We were talking about the fact that visual content was more and more, visible. I guess the challenge for those security or privacy issues, that maybe with text was kind of different. You could just, filter or automatically, stuff like that. What is coming? What are the next challenges for?
Definitely for 2015, it will be, from our point of view, visual web. And we are right now working on how to recognize logos on images without any textual indications. And we are a French company, and so there's a lot of important luxury brands in France, and it's a long time now they ask us to be able to be better at recognizing the logos. So it's the first thing. I think the second thing, and the second big trend on our market will be what I call the who mining, and how to focus not only about the what people are saying, but who is talking. And this who is talking is not only how to define a social account, how many followers he has, or what he's talking about. What is really important is to position all the social accounts in their networks of affinities, to build all the communities, affinities, communities on the social web, to understand what are these communities, because these communities are the new demographics. And if you understand how these communities are structured online and how the information spread from one community to another, from stakeholders to other stakeholders, from gatekeepers to other gatekeepers, or influencers to other influencers, you'll have a very good understanding of how you are perceived and how the information spread on this space. So I think this who mining will be one of the important steps in the social media intelligence field.
And for you, Esteban? Experience management?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it's experience management, but I think for marketers in general, they also need to be thinking about how do you create really good creative content and how do you distribute it, right? So social networks are becoming distribution platforms. They are becoming meta platforms where they have multiple apps. They're really being transformed in what they used to be and how they're growing to be a very meaningful part of people's lives and how marketers look at it. So we think about integrating owned, earned, and paid so that you can do personalization that is not annoying or creepy, but personalization that's actually utilitarian and that allows you to do storytelling that you actually care about. So I think that marketing it was more of an art, and now it's an art plus science. And if those two sides don't come together correctly, then it can be dangerous, because if you don't understand the science part, then you won't understand how to do things like programmatic ad buying and native ads, and you will fail to understand that side of the equation. At the same time, if you just think of everything like a robot and like automation, then you forget about the fact that you still want to appeal to people and to their emotions and to the creative side of a certain brand. So I still think it's really cool to see brands creating amazing content, and it's cheaper than ever to produce almost like a mini film and put it out and give it to the people that actually care about that content.
Yeah. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You will be around, no, if you want
Thank
to
you.
have more questions with you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.